to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I got to tell you something, people. When I moved back from L.A. 6 years ago, a year after that, I went to an 80s concert in Philadelphia. It was a great show, had a great lineup, and I was the guest of Michael Aston from Gene Loves Jezebel. And everyone on that show had done, or after, did do Cooper Talk, whether it be Annabelle Gwynn, Nick Feldman from Wang Chung, except my guest today. And I got him, and he's about to go on tour again with his band Animotion. And he just did I'm guessing it's a one-man show called Up in the Air, a musical memoir, which I really want to hear about because I love that kind of stuff. As a background in doing stand-up comedy, I know what it's like to being on the stage. And my guest is Bill Wadhams. How you doing, Bill?
Hi, Steve. I'm happy to be here. Well, that show you saw in Philadelphia must have been 2018.
Yes, it was. I moved back 6 years ago, and it was 5 years ago, and you guys came in, and that venue is no longer there. And what I remember about that show was they took so long in between the bands. It was weird, because you came on, and you think, well, like Annabelle just came out, and she sang, and then you guys came out. But you'd think, just play the same instruments, because it was just funny. Like, you would play, and then you'd wait like 45 minutes for someone to play 4 songs. It was very odd.
I'm surprised it took that long. It's typically like a 15-minute turnaround, 10 or 15-minute turnaround on those shows. I don't know why it was so slow that night. But sorry about that.
Oh no, it was great. You guys did great. You did great, and you must have left because I went backstage after and I know Clyde Farrington from L.A. and I saw him and Nick Feldman and Mike Score, and I didn't see you, but it was all good. But I want to hear about your Up in the Air, a musical memoir, because you just recently performed that, and this follows like your whole career, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say it does. Although if you go on stage and speak. If you do anything going on stage and speaking, especially if you're doing it as a one-man situation, it's just so critical to two things. One, know what you're going to say, know what you're talking about and know what you're going to say. And then also just know how you want to get from one point to another. And if you start straying, you can run yourself aground into you think I might as well include this bit about so-and-so, and then next thing you know, you and the audience are lost. So it's a project that I've been working on for about 5 years and doing my best to hone it down to a story that follows the threads of my relationship with my father and my brother in particular, because my brother and I both were caught up in the idea of being rock and roll musicians. And eventually he joined Sheryl Crow's band on the Tuesday Night Music Club tour. So that was one of her first international tour, as far as I know. And he was with her for a year, and he co-wrote a song on her second album. It was called Love is a Good Thing. So the show is a lot about my relationship with my brother and how we played together a lot of the time, but then both of us were led down different paths, and we come back together at times.
What made you decide to do this? Because as you're a musician, and every musician is a storyteller, but you really have to tap your inner soul when you're doing a one-man show. Like comedy, we don't have to tap our soul. We can tell jokes, but we try to put a little in there, but we can put that candy coating of a laugh. But when comics cross over to the one-man show, there's a lot of seriousness. For you, what made you decide to tackle this? Because, people know you from music. They must sit there and go, well, wait a second, what are we going to see?
Yeah. I guess I could say two things. One, in 2012, I was approached by a musical director of a very fine theater here in Portland called Artist Repertory Theater. And he asked me if I'd be interested in auditioning for a Tony Award-winning musical called Next to Normal. And I said, yes, I got the part. I did 42 shows in an intimate theater of 200 seats. And it was an experience like none I'd ever had, to be singing and telling this story in a really intimate, visceral way. There's moments where there's a moment in the play where a doctor tells me that my wife needs a certain very severe procedure, and then he walks off. I walk into the middle of the room and sing a song about how this is tearing me up. And wow, it just, the experience was so wonderful to me. I felt the presence of the audience and the connection to them in a way that was different, although related to playing with a band. So after that, the director of that show said, you should write a musical. So then I thought, oh man, what does that mean? I explored that for a few years. At one point, there's a musician whose name is Benjamin Scheuer, and he has a one-man show called The Lion. And The Lion started kind of off Broadway, and it became a huge hit, really. He played 500 shows around the world before he retired it. And his story was about his relationship with his father, and then he was facing cancer. He was diagnosed as stage 4 cancer, and he's singing songs about his personal experience. It was one man and 5 guitars. And he, as the LA Times said that he plays the instrument like he invented it. So, fabulous guitarist, singing from the heart in a theater about the size I had been in, what we call a black box of about 200 people. And I thought, okay, I'm going to see if I can pull something together to do this. Just because, I mean, I've always felt like when I write a song that I want to be telling something about something that's true for me. And I thought, I think I have a story to tell. And this would be a fun way in this later years of my career to possibly travel as a solo act with my wife, she's been handling multimedia aspect of the thing. So it's kind of a husband and wife hitting the road instead of it can be cumbersome to travel with a band.
Oh, I can imagine. Because you always think about it.
Say no more, right?
Yeah, I saw Colin Hay recently in Philly a while ago, and it's just him and his guitars. And so, there's not a big bus, there's a Mercedes minibus, with him and his guitars, and I guess a driver, and he doesn't really have a crew. And I think that must be the way to do it, because, like you said, you only worry about you and your wife. You get there, you set everything up. If something goes wrong, you understand. Your wife understands. There's not going to be the going crazy. But if you don't know the crew, you're going, oh my God, what do I do?
That's right. I mean, bands, you can say a band is like being married to 5 people or something, and I'm playing now with Animotion for over 20 years. And we've learned how to get along with each other, so that's great. But yeah, the idea of being able to create something musical that is not just like, hey, I wrote some new songs. Hey guys, I wrote some new songs. Because there really are so many wonderful musicians out there. And I wanted to do something a little bit different.
I got to ask you, when you workshopped it, because workshopping, if people don't know, workshop means they go, just listeners, Bill will go do it and then tweak it and stuff like that. What was going through your mind the first night you were doing this? Now, you do well in front of the stage. I mean, I've seen you in concert. People know your music. But when it's you and it's your writing, and what was were you nervous? Were you excited? Because I would think you'd be bordering on both.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I should interject that one of the reasons why I decided to pursue this seriously was because this same person who suggested that I write a musical or a theatrical project, he introduced me to a director named Bill Fennelly, who is living currently in Philadelphia. And Bill has lots of credits, including Broadway credits. And he was in Portland directing a play at Portland Center Stage. And I got together with him and had a conversation about one-man shows. And he said he would be interested in helping me get my show up and running. And that was about 5 years ago. And just this past week, he came to Portland, spent a week with me, fine-tuning the show and getting it up and running and doing what we would consider to be the actual premiere of it. But going back to, I know you asked me the performing and workshopping it, is the first workshop was in his living room in Philadelphia for 16 people. And we had spent a few days beforehand discussing it, and then I would work through a scene with him, that sort of thing. And then when I finally performed it in his living room, it is kind of nerve-wracking. My show is about 80 minutes long, and it was intense, but it's I don't know. It's just like making a commitment to hike a mountain or something. You just go, and then you make your way up and down, and then you debrief. And I got some good feedback that night. And since then, I've workshopped it in various places, from a musical theater school to a bar to a very small theater in town here, a 40-seat theater. I played there 3 times, twice in January, once in March, before doing this performance in July.
That's awesome. Now, I want to ask you mentioned you and your brother. So I'm guessing as kids, did you grow up around music? I mean, when did you start your love of music? Were you guys like competitive, or did you both play together, or was it a musical household, or what got you started in this profession that you've had your whole life?
Yeah. First of all, my mother literally sang to us from the moment we were born. She has this angelic voice. She even put out an album. It was kind of like the husbands got together and put up the money for their wives to cut an acetate, and literally in one of those places where you walk out with like maybe a half a dozen records and you can play them. Her band, her group was called Sugar and Spices, and she would sing "Lemon Tree, very pretty, and the lemon flower," that sort of thing. But so first of all, she sang to us, and then she taught us to sing around we would sing Grace around the dining table. We would sing, my dad did barbershop quartet stuff, even though he didn't have as good a pitch. He wasn't solid pitch, but enthusiasm was all there. And he would start out by if he wanted us to sing, he would sing the intro to the song, like, "By the light of the moon, by the silvery moon." And, by the time he got to a point, we all come in with the harmonies. So we had that going on. And then, part of what I tell in my story is that my brother had a medical condition. My father was trying to cheer him up, and he asked a psychiatrist, "How do you tell a 9-year-old kid break bad news to him?" And so the psychiatrist said, "See if you can get someone who is an amputee." Well, it was about losing a limb. So he said, "See if you can find an amputee living a good life, have him write a letter to Tad," my brother Tad. So my dad went on a letter writing spree. And after getting letters back from the President of the United States, the Secretary of the Navy, an Olympic swimmer, he took a long shot and addressed a letter simply to Paul McCartney, Liverpool, England. It made its way to Paul's father, and Paul's father wrote back to say, "Paul's in the Bahamas filming the movie Help. when he returns, I'll ask him to write a letter to Tad. And sure enough, Tad received a 2-page handwritten letter from the Beatle himself, and I've turned it into a song. you know. And so that letter made us feel like we were closer to the Beatles. This was 1964, right after the Beatles' debut on Ed Sullivan. So we saw them on Ed Sullivan, and we looked at each other and said, "Hey, let's start a band." And we were 9 and 11. And by the time I was 12, I was playing my first gig in Rochester, New York, with the band, BANNED. Best band name I've ever had. So this is kind of some of the early fabric of my show, is that I've got a pretty, my dear brother Tad has allowed me to share some of the intimate aspects of his story and how they interweave with my own, and how we make our way to Los Angeles. And then, when you go into the big city and you're an instrumentalist, a singer, whatever, opportunities arise, and you kind of have to juggle. So a lot of people are in multiple groups, seeing which one's going to take off, and that's how I ended up in Animotion, and he ended up with Sheryl Crow.
Now, Animotion, I heard the two bands used to play at Madame Wong's.
Right.
Now, tell me about Madame Wong's back then, because I didn't move out to LA till 2000. And, I missed that whole scene, and I talked to a lot of people who said how Madame Wong's was different, how the Sunset Strip was crazy. You, because now you're the storyteller, you've always been a storyteller, tell me what it was like back then, because New Wave, or punk, whatever I called it, New Wave, was really emerging. What was it like to be part of that early situation?
Yeah, it definitely was exciting. It was, I especially liked the original Madame Wong's, which was a Chinese restaurant in downtown LA, really in Chinatown, LA. And I guess I was living in Hollywood for a while, then Glendale. So it's either way, it's very close by. And I heard about this place, and I dressed up in my rock and roll-y clothes and went down there. And probably one of the first bands I saw in there was the Motels. And their original lineup just destroyed me. It was so great. I was a huge fan of a guitarist named Jeff Gerard. His brother, Marty Gerard, was a keyboard player. So these two brothers were backing up Martha Davis, and the sounds of that synthesizer and that guitar were just blowing my mind. Also, you walk up a staircase into this restaurant, and so maybe the restaurant, when it was full, might have held 60 people or something. And so you have a stage in front of you, a bar behind you, and man, a lot of people played there. Of course, I can't really name off some of the even more famous bands that played there, but I want to say that the Police and Elvis Costello might have played there. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was just the epitome of a cool place to play. And then, my dad was a salesman, so I've got a bit of the gift of like, hey, how you doing? I'm here, to sell myself. And I made back in those days, you had to go into the restaurant and meet Esther Wong. And so I said, Esther, I've got a band, and and typically what they would want you to do is put like a night together. So you've got like your band and a couple other, do you know other bands? Or I'll put you on a bill with some other bands. And then once you get in the door, you're in there, and if you can bring some people, you can play there again. And so I don't know. I think it was accessible. Like for me, the Troubadour, it's like, you got to go to Doug Weston's house. So I went to Doug Weston's house in like Santa Monica, or just on the edge of it was probably West Hollywood. and you go into Doug Weston's house and you just kind of schmooze him a bit, and if he likes your rap, then he has somebody like print up some tickets for you then to go and sell to your show, that kind of thing. So, it was all that was thrilling. At the same time, the band that I had before I met Astrid Plain and her band Red Zone, my band, I thought we were great. I in some respects, I feel like it was the best band I ever had, but we couldn't get arrested by record companies. Looking back, I think possibly it might have had something to do with maybe we weren't very unique in terms of, and we were 2 guitars, bass, and drums, four good-looking white guys with some Stratocasters and Fender bass and stuff like that. I mean, the songs were good, but it wasn't like, I didn't have a My Sharona in my pocket. I was playing love songs. I was very Beatles influenced. I tried to get a little punky here and there. But so I don't know. That's a little bit of my experience.
Now, how did you and Animotion actually end up getting together?
Yeah. I was recording in a studio, and it was actually a school for recording engineers. And I was the guinea pig band. And someone was in the class, was interested in the recording process, but he was, in fact, aspiring to be a manager, and he was managing Astrid and her band. Actually, I think he met Astrid after the original Red Zone broke up. So Red Zone was Astrid, drummer Frenchie, and a married couple. That band broke up. The married couple went away. It just so happened that the guy in the married couple was the guitarist and songwriter of Red Zone. So what you had was Astrid and a drummer. They pulled in a keyboard player, friend of theirs, and boyfriend of Astrid, Charles. So this guy saw me recording, and he thought this would be a good fit for this new band that's developing around Astrid. And so he invited me to meet them, and I brought them some demos of things that I had done at the studio, and they liked it, and they invited me to join them. I started rehearsing. I had second thoughts. I wasn't so sure about this group. But man, they also had a good music lawyer who was able to, we went into a recording studio. The manager invested in recording my songs, took the demo, gave the demo to a lawyer walked it into Polygram Records, and in less than a year, we were talking deal. So it's just one of those, another story where it's like who you know and who knows who, and in the case, the band I was in, we had no avenues into the companies. But when I got together with Astrid, this lawyer had the backstage pass to the record companies.
Now, once you're in the group, how do you guys end up playing Obsession? Because you didn't write that, and you're a songwriter. So,
yeah.
I always wonder, it must be something where, you want the chance. You're like, this is what I do. I'm a guitarist, I'm a songwriter. Let me write my damn songs. But then the record company goes, well, we want you to put this. I mean, how did that come up? How did that end up happening that you guys performed it? And as an artist, how did you feel about it?
That is kind of at the core of my show. Although when I say at the core, I mean, it's, I think people will find it interesting because I actually act out kind of like what it was like being in a studio and having this, the producer say, hey, I've got this song from outside of the band. I think it could be a hit for you. Now, I'm the writer, so I'm going, okay, So you either don't think my songs are hits or you don't think we have enough. You're trying to hedge your bet. I understand what you're doing, but still, I don't like the idea. I wasn't even, see, I hate to talk negatively about the song because I was in an interview once on a TV program and I started to say, well, I didn't really, like the song. I didn't write it. I didn't like, and man, the interview just went in the toilet. So, people who like the song don't want to hear that. But when it was first presented to me, I was like, okay, there's a line. And I said to the producer, this line, I am a possession unopened at your feet. That's not me. I don't feel comfortable singing that I'm a possession at someone's feet. Well, that's the way that's part of an obsession, Bill. It's just, that's the way, come on, just go with the program here. Let's do this. And so at first they didn't want me to sing it because the original version, Michael DeBar, who wrote the lyrics and sang on it, he spoke the verses. You are an obsession. I cannot sleep, and they're like, this is what we want you to do. And I'm like, I'm a singer, And so again, I act out in my one-man show. I'm on a microphone and I'm going, okay, this is where I sing, right? You what? You want me to speak it? And so it's like, it was a process of discovering, like, whoa. And then I said, hey, look, let me take a whack. Just let me take a whack at singing. I want to show you what it would sound like if I sing it. And when you hear the final record, there is speaking and singing. If you go back and listen, you'll hear the spoken voice and the singing voice overlapping. So it was a publisher brought it to the producer. The producer played it to the A&R department, the artist and rep department, and they said, yeah, let's record that song. And then they proceeded to put like half of the budget of the record into that one song.
Hey, see, that's just crazy. It's funny. When the artist conflicts with something else, they always, because bottom line is, it's like now with the Hollywood strike going on. I know a lot of actors, and it's like, no, and I know a lot of TV writers. AI can't do that. You guys, as they always say, someone said they should be able to create a Hollywood producer, John Cleese said, or an executive with AI because they don't know anything. And it happens a lot like that.
Yeah. That's right. And it's funny. I just, Holly Knight, who was a co-writer on Obsession, recently put out a book, and I'm always kind of holding my breath to hear what she has to say, because we haven't had a lot of communication with her. I have had some communication with pleasant communication with Michael DeBar, but Holly said, well, they did more of a pop version than we did. Our version was more dark and edgy and punky of Obsession. And she said, and their video, there's a bunch of handsome men in togas handing out hors d'oeuvres. And I'm like, no, they're not. I think she's confusing us with like a soft sell video or something. And I sent her a message. She didn't even get back to me. It's kind of like, yeah. Well, so at any rate, the bottom line, really what it comes down to is I have to ask myself this question: Would you rather have just gone into the dustbin of all the people who tried to get onto the charts, or accept the fact that someone else wrote the song? And I'm happy to have sung a song, and I continue to get to sing a song out there, and share that moment with fans, because to me that's what it's about. It's not about like people clapping for me. It's about that when I sing the song and I can tell people recognize my voice, there's just a moment of connection, and we're going to go on this like 3-5 minute ride together, and it's going to stir up memories for you, and this is a memory for me, and it's great.
Well, when the song, because everyone knows the song, when it took off, how did it change your life? I know, did you guys get stuck, get on a bigger tour? Did someone say they have the hit, and MTV was very important? I mean, how did it change things for you?
There's probably a lot of things to say about that, but first of all, I was recognized because we were on. Our video was being played once an hour, day and night. We were in power rotation, so I went from not being someone you would recognize to being recognized every time I go out, even in foreign countries. So that was bizarre. Once a woman came up to me and after a show and said, "Give me something of yours." And I said, "Like what?" She said, "Give me your shoes." I said, "I just bought these shoes." "But you're a millionaire. You can get another pair." Well, so the perception seems to be if you're in the top 10, you're set. You're fat. But what people don't understand is it's the writers who get money from airplay, and that's where really the lion's share over the course of years is the income comes from radio airplay, from record sales. The band would get about 50 cents per album, but from that we would have to pay back every dime the record company spent on the albums, the videos, tour support. Then we pay our lawyers, our managers, accountants. Whatever's left, we split among 6 people, and it's not much. So I had fame without fortune. And that sets up a difficult situation because I was married, and I'm on tour, having a blast, getting a per diem. So it's just kind of taking care of my my expense. I come off of a tour, and and now I'm like struggling to pay my bills. And it's hard to justify that to a wife. So yeah, it was, but so then it was a matter of how can we keep this thing going, or how can we change this to the next level where actually it is, making income for the band. How can we do this? Going into the second album, everybody became songwriters. Now I'm competing with the members of the band to get songs on the record. And I had 3 songs on the second record. I had 7 on the first. I had less songs, but so the stakes got higher with each album.
Now, when you were after the first album, who were you touring with? Who were some of the bands you guys were playing with?
First band we were out with was Depeche Mode, which was just kind of phenomenal. And we played a couple shows with them. The following year, they invited us to do their North American tour with them. They invited us to tour for like months, and we turned it down because we looked at the numbers and we could see that the tour itself might break even or be in the red, and we're paying it's like coming against money we would make from record sales. And we were just so like financially stressed that we turned down, and I think that's one of my biggest regrets when I look back at my career with Animotion is I would have liked to have gone on that tour. But at the same time, if I had, I don't think my marriage would have survived. I don't think I'd have this sweet, beautiful daughter that I have now, who's in her 30s. That's a real, that's real. That's a real thing I have to deal with, But we went out, we played with Depeche Mode. Then we did a tour with Howard Jones. We did in U.S. and Canada with Howard Jones. That was 85. And that, in 86, we did one-off shows, but we didn't actually go out on a tour with anybody.
How grueling is the road? I mean, when I did stand-up, it was just you in a car, and I would only go on like a we go on a 10 night clip at the most. But then we would play clubs in our town in the Philadelphia area. How grueling is it? I mean, I know it's when we're young, but still, it's people don't get it. They think it's all glamorous, but it's a pain in the ass driving from place to place. People don't get it. And you sit there, you wake up, and you're like, where the hell am I? You don't even know what town you're in. I mean, I went one time from playing a casino in Atlantic City to the next week, I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I'm staying in a converted trailer park. Okay, so it wasn't one of those things that you go, oh, this is glamorous show business. It's not easy. But how grueling was it for you? Because you guys, when you were with Howard Jones, you're doing camping.
Well, we had a road manager who's just fantastic. He would slip a piece of paper under our hotel room door saying, you are in Cleveland. You have an interview with the radio station at 1:00. You have a show tonight at 8:00. You have to be at the venue. A car will pick you up here, whatever. So these days I manage the band, so I'm the one that's arranging every move that we make and figuring out how that's all going to work out. But back then we were just sort of. We didn't have to worry too much about all that stuff, and to get in the bus and drive from, across Canada, that kind of thing. Those can be long days, but we had VHS players were playing the Terminator and, stuff like that, music. And it was our first year of really touring, before Howard Jones, we did a headlining tour in a Winnebago. That was a little tight, But I would say, in 2018 we did 26 dates, pretty consecutively, and that included 2 dates in Europe, and that was grueling. That was definitely grueling, but. But it was kind of rare. We hadn't done so many dates, in previous years. So, we stepped up. This year we're doing 12 shows.
Now, why did Animotion? Why did you leave?
Why did I leave? Because the guy who signed us left the record company, and he left us with someone who didn't like our band or the style of music we were playing. So he was determined to make us over. And I disagreed with him on what Animotion should be. And I saw the possibility of my songs really getting the support that they need, just going out the window. He was not listening to my songs. He didn't like my choice of producer. I wanted to work with Stephen Hague, who had produced Pet Shop Boys, Tina Turner, a bunch of people, and he had agreed to work with us within the budget we had in his studio in England. And I thought, damn, this is perfect for us. And this new guy at the label wanted us to be produced by someone who was like an assistant producer on the latest Heart record. And he literally said he wanted us to be more like Heart and Starship, bands that had given up their original identities in favor of Hollywood hit songwriters or wherever they came from, So Heart went from Barracuda to These Dreams Are Gone, and so they had a massive hit, and that worked for them. And this guy thought that he could engineer sort of like, I'm going to remake the band. And, he didn't flat out say there's no room for your songs, but he was treating me that way. There was a couple other factors, but it was, it was a bit of an emotional decision. And again, partially I was doing it to save a marriage that was like on the skids. So yeah.
So what do you do then? I always wonder, because, I left comedy for a long time. I just do it occasionally now. I left because I just got tired of the travel and whatever reasons. But you're recognizable from the band, and that's something, and that's that's a drug. Going on stage and people knowing you and singing, and when they hear that song, people, that's something that's a drug for a lot of us. What do you do when you leave the band? Because you're talented, you've had a big hit, but what direction did you want to go in?
Well, initially I thought, okay, I'm going solo. And I did write and record and tried to get a deal. This was like 87, 88, 89. And without internet, you're really kind of relying on who can you call, who can you go see, who's going to help you get in a door or walk down the street. And I had some near misses, where I'd submitted demos and people actually said, we're going to make a record, and then it fizzled, and then, but someone invited me to, said, hey, my roommate is working at an ad agency and they're looking for someone who can do paste up and layout, graphic design work, and they're willing to train. And I said, yes. I went in. I loved it. I thought, oh my gosh, I like this. I'm sitting at a desk with drafting pens and stuff. This is before Macintosh. And this was very aesthetic, and I'm using, photo machines, and I'm learning all this stuff. I'm looking out the window at Wilshire Boulevard. I thought, I like this. And then I eventually got a job at NBC in the print ad department. And I was driving around at lunchtime smoking a joint with the vice president of NBC in the creative department. And I'm like, okay, this is all right. And so I continued to write and record, but graphic design became my fallback career. And by the time I got to Portland, Oregon, I knew someone who knew someone, and I got in the door at an agency called Wyden and Kennedy, and they were the ones that kind of created the Just Do It for Nike. And so they've been with Nike almost exclusively ever since. But while I was there, we were doing Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and it was a really, fun agency and exciting, and a great way to kind of get my feet on the ground here in Portland. And then there's a great pub scene here. And so I started playing acoustic guitar in pubs. And then over the last decade, I have a trio of a drummer and a bass player who are my son's age. I've got sons in their 40s, and I've got bandmates in their 40s, and they kick ass. And we just have a great, fun time. So, but, when you mention I've got people know Obsession and they know my face maybe, but it doesn't really guarantee that you're going to sell tickets to a venue. Even if we put up the name Animotion on a marquee up here, it's because we've tried this. People are like, they know the song name more than the band name almost. They know Obsession, and some people know Animotion, but it's just it's not a given, right? And so even if I have gigs in town and it says, oh, tonight at this pub, it's Bill from Animotion, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily pull. It more like pulls from the reputation that I've just built as Bill Wadhams here in Portland doing my thing.
Well, and that's good. But now the Lost 80s Live, how did you get involved? That, to me, that is one of the best ideas because, as I said, I'm an 80s guy. We talk about it at college. Whenever that's the stuff. I was graduated high school in 82 and college in 86. So that's my hardcore. That's me coming of age. And when these concerts started coming together, it was great because you would sit there and you knew you could go to a show and you would know every song, and you would love every song, and it would take you back to a certain place. And it's a great concept. But when did you start getting involved with that? Were you guys in from the get-go? I mean, how did that all come about that they said, hey, we want you to play this?
Well, first of all, the creator of Lost 80s Live, his name is Rob Juarez. And I met Rob Juarez when he was a teenager in 1985, and he was taking photographs for record companies. I mean, he'd found a way that he could take photograph of bands. They'd give him a pass. He'd take photos, and they'd pay him. He was a very enterprising young man. Years later, he and Dave Wakeling got together and started doing some shows. But I think when he branded it Lost 80s, I think we were with him maybe in his first year that he did it. And so it'd be the English Beat and us. I don't know if Flock of Seagulls, they might have been in on it right from the beginning. But yeah, Rob sought me out for two reasons. One, because, we fit the kind of the idea, but also because I'd been nice to him back in the day. He remembered me as one of the nice guys of the 80s, I guess. And wanted, he said, hey, let's do this. And so, we've been doing it ever since.
How great is it? Like when you guys, when you're all backstage, it must be cool because you all have stories, you all had different lives. And is it entertaining, or is it, do you sit there and go, I just want to do my stuff and leave? I mean, everyone's different, but how do you do it? I started to do a video podcast. I was going to make it an audio podcast. And I called it the Genius Insanity Tour, because it's genius that they put these bands together. It's insane when they put these bands together. And I just found, and that was 2018. And I was very optimistic. I had my field recorder, I had video, I had all kinds of stuff going on, but I found it was a lot of work. As you probably know, it's just a lot of work. And I just couldn't keep it up. But what happens backstage is that it varies. One night we might have 5 bands, 7 bands. It's as many in some of the shows as like 17 acts. And so it's kind of insane backstage. Some venues, like the Greek Theater, is surprisingly massive backstage. So there's a lot of room for everybody. Other places, like the Mountain Winery in Saratoga, California, is one of my favorite venues once I get out on stage. But backstage, there's like maybe 3 very small green rooms and then 1 little common area. So it's real hard to get some space. And one of the bands that I love on the tour is Josie Cotton. And she's there with it. She's got an all-girl band. Those guys need a little bit of privacy, right? And Astrid needs a little bit of privacy here and there, and Dale Bozia. And so we're kind of on top of each other. And also, like some people, like Dale, doesn't like to fly. So by the time she gets there, she and her band, man, they've had a long day. And Flock of Seagulls, they often travel in a van. Mike prefers to drive. So it's like everybody is like, doing their best to just kind of get back there and be civil and like, hey, get out of my space, But there's it's never quite come to that. But it's a little bumpy. It's a little bumpy here and there. But it is like last year. I remember the first date, and I guess the first date was in Salt Lake City, and we had not been into this venue, and it was a giant sports arena. It was huge, and it's just surreal walking backstage with the guys from Wang Chung as we catch a glimpse of the stage for the first time. And you're like, oh my gosh. And then, of course, 2 hours later, you're on stage and the monitor guys are completely screwing up.
our road manager said that was the worst crew he's ever run into. They were just kind of like obstinate. They were pushing against him the whole time. It was just terrible. And then we went out and we started our first song, and I've never done this. I just said, stop. I walked over to the monitor guy and I said, you have to turn this up and turn that, or we can't play. And then I apologized to the audience, and we kept going. So there's moments like that, but it's really, so it's kind of, it's run and gun, but when it works, it's breathtaking. It really is.
Well, how great is it for you when you sit there and you're on stage, and then, and when you check out the audience, that there's people and there's their kids, and then there's their grandkids, because 80s music and everything, like Clive Farrington went in Room. When Napoleon Dynamite came out and The Promise hit, it was like a whole resurgence. How great is it for you when you sit there and you go, man, like they might have actually had that kid listening to our song. I mean, that must just be a great feeling.
I know. It's, a lot of times in these summer concerts, we can see people's faces because it's still light out and it's an outdoor theater. And we can see people mouthing the words. We can see people smiling. We can see people gesturing to us. And we, Astrid and I, we kind of play a cat and mouse game on stage. We just sort of like goof around with each other. We've found a way to like not cross boundaries or make people feel uncomfortable, but otherwise I'm going to come across the stage and grab her and yank her to myself, or she's going to push me down, practically knock me over, grab me by the scruff of the neck. And we're having fun, and we can see that the audience is enjoying it with us, But so, it's pretty amazing. And then in recent years, my son Chris, one of my sons, Chris, is playing bass with us, and it's phenomenal to just look over, see my son, both of us kind of rocking out and enjoying the moment. It takes it to another level.
Now, when's you've had a long career. When's the first time you heard yourself on the radio?
On the radio?
Yeah. Do you remember?
Yeah. The first time it was Obsession, and it was getting played in Los Angeles on KROQ. And the first time I heard it, I'm driving my little Datsun 510, and so we're in 85. It was 84, because the record came out in 84, but it wasn't a national hit until 85. So I was in my little old car, just driving from one place to another. I was painting houses at the time, because the record came out. It was getting played in Los Angeles, but nowhere else for months. And so I had to go back to painting houses. And then it took off. It started to take off in January of 85. But yeah, the first time driving down the road, it was a wonderful feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm on the radio. Here I am. It was exciting.
Two final questions. One, from the 80s and the big times of when you guys were really big, what's your fondest memory of that?
Okay. Well, one that stands out is when we were on our very first tour as a headliner in the Winnebago. I came to Portland, Oregon for the first time, and we played at a club that used to be called Starry Nights. Now it's called Roseland. I think it holds 800 or 900 people. It was sold out. And what I like about the venue is that there is about 500 people on the floor, and then about 300 or 400 people in a balcony. And the entire, actually, it's very similar to that Philadelphia venue. Electric something.
Electrified. It's now closed, actually. But
yeah, but it was like that because it holds hundreds of people, but you can also kind of see everybody, and you kind of feel the room breathing. And I really love the feeling of an intimate setting like that. Something like the Greek Theater or places that have 8,000-10,000 people. It's almost surreal to the point where I feel, it's its own kind of surreal experience. But being in a more intimate space, to me, where the audience is really with you, and I felt like that night they were with us on all the songs, including my songs as well as Obsession, and so that's one that stands out.
And finally, what is the future for Up in the Air? What do you want to do with it? What would you like to see happen to it?
Yeah, what I want to do with it is I want to take it to select cities and play, whether it's a night or a few nights. I want to play in my hometown of Rochester, New York. I went to high school in the Washington, D.C. area, the suburbs in Maryland. I'd like to play there. I do not intend to stream it. I've considered writing a book. I've decided not to do that. I love the experience I'm willing to share my story in an intimate setting with people who are willing to come out and sit down and spend 80 minutes with me. And if I could do that with my wife, Kate, in a dozen cities over the next year, that would be great. That would actually be a lot. If it ends up that I only make it to like a few cities and like that, that's okay. It's part of it is the journey of doing it, and I've been very satisfied in my recent performance.
That's awesome, Bill. I'm glad we got to talk. The tour, people, starts Lost 80s Live, starts August 10th. How can people get in touch with you? Animotion website. How can they find out what's going on with you?
Sure. I have a website, billwadhams.com. And Animotion website is Animotion-Obsession. If you just look for an Animotion website, you can probably find it. And I think there's a way to get in touch with me through that website. I'm also Instagram, my name. Yeah.
So people, go see the Lost Live 80s. And when Up in the Air comes to your town, which it will, go see it. You can go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 965 episodes there. You can email me, cooper@coopertalk.net. Twitter @CooperTalk, Instagram @CooperTalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you.